The mind at the level of the first dhyana enters a special mode of abiding. This differs from ordinary worldly consciousness. And it differs from access concentration. Access is good for contemplation and motion, but for dhyanas it is not suitable. The access stage must also be passed. In the first dhyana, consciousness is already focused, and factors related to directing and holding the mind on the object are present. And the first dhyana is like the first stable entry into absorption, but not yet ultimate emptiness. So, Vitarka, initial direction of the mind to the object. Vichara, holding the mind on the object. Piti, rapture, joyful uplift. Sukha, happiness, inner well-being. Ekagrata, one-pointedness, focus of the mind. And there are evaluation criteria. More detailed ones. When a yogi has just entered dhyana, then, when the yogi has stabilized at this level of dhyana, and when he has achieved mastery in it. And to achieve mastery, one must possess 5 factors. If all these 5 factors are observed, then he is a master of this dhyana. And it's believed one must master one dhyana before moving on to another. We'll discuss this in more detail later. So, in the first dhyana, the mind enters the object, is held in it, experiences joy from gathering within, enjoys inner well-being, and remains in relative unity. Metaphorically speaking, it's like a person who has finally entered a quiet, protected temple after a long stay in the noise of the street. It's like a different mode of being. But in the first dhyana, there is still a certain subtle activity. The mind, as it were, still slightly touches the object and holds on to it. Therefore, 2 factors, these Vitarka and Vichara, are still needed here. In the first dhyana, there is some subtle mental activity. It is very purified, very focused, but still an activity. This is not the activity where you get distracted and think about something. It's more of an activity related to directing and holding the mind on an object, for example, a point, a chosen deity, or a seed syllable. But the first dhyana is already absorption. But there are still many such seams. There is still the movement of entry and holding. But if you manage to overcome Vitarka and Vichara and leave them behind, refining consciousness so that you no longer need to return and hold subtly, then you can transition to the second dhyana. In the second dhyana, the state becomes more internal and calm, and the mind no longer needs the adjustment that was required in the first dhyana. The first dhyana is a steady entry and staying. The second is already a more stable, deep merging with the object. Consciousness is even more focused, holistic, more self-sufficient. And here, there is no need to repeatedly direct yourself toward the object and hold yourself on it by willpower. The object is not held by effort. One simply abides in it. You are one with the object. Vitarka falls away. Vichara falls away. But the dhyana deepens, becomes more refined. That is, the initial direction of the mind and the holding of the mind as a separate noticeable factor disappear. Piti, rapture, is present. Sukha, happiness, is present. Ekagrata, one-pointedness. And consciousness became simpler, more concise. There is an expression, the short mind of a sadhu. Short means it does not branch out. It is not complicated, not judgmental, not reflecting. It is simpler. And so, if you want to understand what the short mind of a sadhu is, you must reach the second dhyana, and everything will become clear. In the second dhyana, you do not use much effort, thinking, or imagery. You directly hold consciousness and experience rapture, happiness, and one-pointedness. In the first dhyana, there was a moment. You have to enter the object, establish a connection, and not lose it, hold on to it. That is on a point, a candle flame, a seed syllable, a deity, the four infinites, the sense of I, or emptiness. All these are traditional objects for your dhyana. But in the second dhyana, it is no longer necessary. The mind is so collected that there is no need to separately guide it to the object. It naturally remains in unity with the object. The first dhyana is like a person entering a temple and sitting down. And the second is when he is already inside this separate space, has completely calmed down, and does not even make any extra movements anymore. So, in the second dhyana, joy, happiness, and one-pointedness remain, but the subtle cognitive work disappears. And it is experienced as purer, more non-dual in its internal structure. And if we want to understand if our meditation was successful, if someone's experience was successful when they tell us, we can use these 5 factors of dhyana and analyze it from the perspective of dhyana. In other words, meditation must be composed of these specific factors as a form of organized work of consciousness, and only then will it be truly successful. If we meditate without these factors, sort of at random, well, it is unknown whether we have achieved deepening, refinement, or not. Because there are many different states that are not dhyanas, that do not lead to samadhi, but they are also quite interesting. But you can just sit, for example, and feel so satisfied with yourself. Peace, silence, even a certain luminosity. The body is weightless, a bit of expansion. But if we analyze whether there is progress according to these factors, and whether coarser factors are being set aside or not, according to the logic of the dhyanas, then we will understand where to move. The logic of the dhyanas is such that coarse factors are discarded at each dhyana, and the subtlest factors remain. This means we are moving in the right direction. Along the path of samadhi and the path of achieving true nirvana, the state of Brahman. If these factors are not discarded, then it's hard to move forward and hard to understand your progress in meditation if we don't conduct such an assessment based on these 5 factors. We can, dwell in various states, but not all of them lead to enlightenment. So the first dhyana is a focus that is still establishing itself. The second dhyana is a focus that has already been established. If you imagine a lake, then in the first dhyana, the lake's surface is already protected from the wind, but the water is still, as it were, reaching a state of stability. And in the second dhyana, the water in the lake has become smoother, and there is no longer any need to level anything out. The lake simply remains in its smoothness. And within this smoothness of the lake, there is also the joyful energy of Piti, the pleasant happiness of Sukha, and deep focus, the one-pointedness of Ekagrata. So in the second dhyana, Vitarka is absent, Vichara is absent, Piti remains, Sukha remains, Ekagrata remains. Therefore, the second dhyana is purer than the first, because the coarser factors, directing attention, sustaining attention, fall away in it. As you understand, the teaching of the dhyanas is the art of managing attention. Our attention is the very resource that we have on the path to enlightenment. And on how well we learn to manage it depends whether we will be able to cast our attention into the void, into non-duality, into the dimension of turiya, beyond waking, dreaming sleep, dreamless sleep, beyond the 5 sheaths. And we send our attention forth. But to send this attention, it must be very well sharpened, well trained.